What's up, everybody? We had the blog yesterday for Black Cat, kind of illustrating how she's going to be released. It's the Scourge style event for a legendary character, of course, and there's going to be two traits we need on certain nodes. We got the Nowhere trait, and we have the Sinister Six trait. There's a lot that goes into that, so what I wanted to do is kind of do a deep dive on the stats, do a comparison, just look at the kits, how they're going to function, and talk about like what would need to happen for these teams to either out-edge each other or to both be useful, and to go from there. So without further ado, let's get into that right now. So let's look at what I'm going to assume is going to be the primary team first, the newest team, right? The Nowhere team. And what I want to do is, I'm not going to read out these stat numbers to you because that would be obnoxious and a waste of everyone's time. But just take a brief look at basically the health and the armor. So Nova's a head above. He gets 60% outside of war, 90% in war. So that's why he's up there at 1.17. The rest of them, they're kind of averaging out. It looks about like 6.3, 6.2, sorry, 630, 620,000 life. Then if we look at the damage, it looks like it's averaging around 50,000 with Thor ahead, but he's getting 25% outside of war. And then they have the rest of their stats, and they're all pretty good. Like baseline armor looking at about 30,000, focus looking at about 17,000, resist looking at about 14,000, and the speed is where this team kind of struggles, right? So Nova 126 is nice. Cosmo 119 isn't bad, but the rest are pretty awful. Like even Star-Lord 116. I can't believe he's not at least the same as his counterpart, the OG Star-Lord at 120. That's another story though. Where this team shines brightest is where all new teams shine brightest, and that's their team modifiers. So Cosmo giving 10% resistance, 20% resistance in war. Korg 30% armor, 60% in war. Nova 30% max health, 60% max health in war. Himself, he gets 90% total in war. And he also causes cosmic enemies to not get defense up. Star-Lord, 50% focus everywhere, 100% focus in war, and Thor gives 50% damage in war, or just 25% damage to himself outside of war. So why am I including all the war tags? Well, there's a pattern that we've noticed with the Scourges, or these trials, whatever you want to call them. And if we're looking at the past Nova trial, we had the Cosmic Crucible Apex team, that Masters of Evil team, and then we also had this, pesky City Hero section that just so happened to be really good with the Nowhere team, or sorry, the New Warriors team, who also were Cosmic Crucible. So I am under the assumption that there's probably going to be a Scourge that you click it and it's going to activate war tags in this Crucible. And this is going to benefit both Nowhere and the Sinister Six team. But we're also going to do an analysis if that does not exist. All right, so just a little bit of reasoning for why. So now let's go ahead and look over at the Sinister Six team. And you're going to see kind of a night and day difference, with the exception of one character, Swarm. Swarm just got reworked, right? So he's got the kind of stats you would expect from a new character, like we saw in Nowhere. He's got about 1 million life, so he actually has a huge life pool compared to most characters, rivaling Nova, which is crazy. And then he has 80,000 damage. Now, he has 25% damage on his passive, so that's where that's coming from. But keep in mind, there's a reason why Swarm's life pool is so big. It's because after a while, he starts killing himself really quickly if he runs out of charges, which is why Quicksilver is one of the big answers to the Infestation team. Then Doc Ock. Doc Ock's actually looking pretty good at around 900,000 life, 50,000 damage. Goblin coming in, 800,000 life, 60,000 damage, the recent Underworld rework. And then it drops off a cliff. Absolute garbage stats after that. Electro and Vulture. We're going with Electro because if it is a war Scourge that you're allowed to put on there, then you're going to want her. She's one of the charged Sinister Six. She's ripping off a bunch of buffs from the enemy. She's hitting super hard. Lots of good stuff coming from her if there is war active. And then Vulture, there's a reason why Vulture, we'll talk about that at the end. I just didn't want to do Rhino because he does get a giant life pool from having the Sinister Six team. And that's going to kind of muddy the waters on how this team would actually function inside the trial. And if we look at the damage, if we were to average that damage out, well, you'll see when we get a little bit lower. This is an older team, though, so the team modifiers that we're going to get, Doc Ock, 40% health, 20% block chance, 10,000% resistance to offense down. Pretty interesting stuff happening there. But as you see, it is not the textbook we just saw when we were looking at the Nowhere team, which really messes with the numbers, especially when we do a comparison. So on the comparison, the Nowhere team, outside war health average around 900,000. In war health average, around 1.1 million. Outside war damage, 50,000. Inside war damage, 72,000. So really high numbers there. Sinister Six, this is going to surprise you. This is kind of crazy because it was the Doc Ock passive doing the 1.4 modifier on the health. So the health average, they don't get anything inside of war. It's just everywhere. So even if there isn't a war tag, this would be their health at 920,000. Really impressive, right? And the damage average would also be 56,381. Also, really, really impressive. But we need to look at something a little, I don't know, unfortunate, I guess you would say. Yeah, so if we were to take Swarm out, those averages drop like crazy. So Swarm with the current rework was such a stat stick to the team that it kind of muddied the waters a bit. So the average health without Swarm is only 800,000, even with the Doc Ock passive, and the average damage without Swarm is only 50,000, which is kind of the same as the outside war damage of the Nowhere team. This doesn't count the resistance and the armor and the enemy defense up and the 100% focus that Nowhere gets on their side, all those other stats, or the 20% block chance, 10,000% resistance to offense down that the Sinister Six team gets. But what I've done here is a little tricky. And I didn't mean to trick you guys. I was trying to make it a little bit more reasonable for the average roster. This Sinister Six stats is assuming 7 red star, 7 yellow star, gear tier 17. I know that's not average, but I wanted to kind of illustrate something. This Nowhere team on these stats is at 5 red, 5 yellow, gear tier 17. So if you did better on the Nowhere Scourge, or the Nova Trial rather, and you have him at 7 yellow, 5 red, then this is going to get crazily inflated. The same way Swarm inflates the numbers over for the Sinister Six. They've also been putting these characters in a lot of passes. So if you went hard on their events and you have more than a 5-star on these characters, all of a sudden the Nowhere team starts blowing the Sinister Six team out of the frickin' water. So I just wanted it to come clean about that comparison. This is to illustrate if you're on a super free-to-play track and you have around the 4 red, 4 yellow, say for the entire Nowhere team, but you got lucky on Sinister Six stars and you have them at 7 red for whatever reason, you could kind of extrapolate somewhat even stats, at least on the health and damage front. The resistance and armor front is not close. Nowhere team blows it out of the water. So I just kind of want to talk about that. But this doesn't take into account the kits at all. And if we're looking at the kits, it's not close. It's not close whatsoever. What the Nowhere team does is what a new team does, right? We got stuns, deflects, defense up, healing, buff clears, buff cleanses. If it's in war, they're going to have safeguard. They're going to have a battlefield effect. They're going to have all this. What's Sinister Six going to have? Sinister Six is going to have brunt damage from Swarm, who after 7 turns will start killing himself. So if it's a long node, Swarm's going to take himself out, kill himself. They have Electro, who can do offense down and strip buffs and do some good single target damage. They're going to have Vulture, who does some nice Terminator Rewind, which is why we threw him in. He's kind of the best character standalone outside of the other Sinister Six members. Green Goblin, he does okay single target damage. He's really just there because he has better stats, and his ultimate is a little bit of AoE, though it's very RNG dependent. And then Doc Ock can come in. He's got a nice buff clear. He's got regen on his health. He does healing on blocks, and he gets, I think, speed for that and speed up. It's just nowhere near as impressive as mechanically what the Nowhere team does. So, if you wanted my advice, it's if you're only going to build one team up, it is 100% obvious to me that the Nowhere team wins hands down. It's not close. It's not competitive. Hands down, the Nowhere team wins. But there's a couple what ifs we should talk about in this conversation. What if you don't have Nova? The Nova trial was such a goddamn shit show. From the broken Scourges to rerunning it to people not knowing that they reran it. So they thought they were in the leaderboards, but they only ended up with a 3-star or 4-star Nova and 0 red stars because of that issue. So that's and some people just didn't do it because they were like, no, I'm not doing this. There's bugged. I hate it. Right? So some people just don't have Nova. So What if you don't have Nova? Well, this is what I would suggest. For nodes 5 or nodes 10, I think you're still using the 4 Nowhere piece, because they have a lot of synergy with each other independent of Nova, which is really nice. And then Doc Ock would come in there. He's got the heal, he's got the buff flip. He would work well. Or you could try Swarm. Now, I hesitated to even put this one up there because without Doc Ock, Swarm gets 4 charges on spawn. So on his 5th turn, he's basically killing himself. He has a huge damage stat. He's hitting himself for like 300% piercing damage or whatever the hell it is. It's absolutely insane. So I would be very concerned about not having Nova in this trial. Now, could you just do a full Sinister Six team? You could, and I worry that the very second anybody not named Swarm or Doc Ock gets targeted, they're dead. If you bring Electro in there and she gets targeted off rip, you're dead. If Vulture gets targeted, like he'll probably be deleted from your roster. That's how weak he is. So I would really be concerned about anybody thinking Sinister Six would be the option here. The difficulty that we saw on the Nova trials, on those nodes, if you only had X Factor, you may struggle to get him unlocked. Because the type of player that maybe doesn't have Nova, or it can only build up one team to a usable level, if it's just Sinister Six, I would almost be worried about you clearing difficulty 5. If, say, you're stuck at like gear tier 15, gear tier 14 max on your characters. I would be seriously concerned about you unlocking Black Cat. Now, for Arena, she's such an important character. Like, that's not something you can sustain and get cores after. Because all of a sudden, when the Secret Defenders are populated everywhere in the arena, and you don't have her because you couldn't beat difficulty 5 because you went for Sinister 6, I would just be concerned about that being kind of more commonplace around casual players. I'd be very worried about that. But there's another what if to consider, which is really interesting because, you know, our friend Tana, he's been right more often than he's been wrong lately. And he's got a little bit of a rumor, a little bit of a leak that, you know, we could be getting a Goblin tech team. Now it feels like something they would do. Because again, if we're noticing patterns, we're kind of extrapolating that. We're probably going to see the activate this Scourge and war tags are activated. So if we're noticing patterns like that, we also got to notice other patterns. We had the Crucible one done already. Sorry, no, not the Crucible. We had the new War legendary character came out. That was Nova. We're having the Arena legendary come out. That is Black Cat. So that would be the equivalent of Red Hulk and Morgan. So it stands to reason the next two is going to be a Crucible one similar to Rogue, and then a Raid one similar to Archangel. Now we need a tech raid team. If you're doing incursion raids, you know this. You know I'm not speaking just from a Kraken perspective. That section, they neutered Bionic Avengers to the point where it just doesn't work. So you need to have a tech team, and this would fit perfectly with Green Goblin. And there's also a lot of other tech characters that they would be able to sell you that would thematically fit in with Green Goblin and would also mimic what Deathseed did. So if we have a new legendary Green Goblin, they could pair it with the legendary Doc Ock, which is exactly what they did with Archangel and Magneto. They could then sell us Hobgoblin, who's another tech character. They could sell us Scorpion, who's another tech character. They could sell us Smythe with his spider summons. That'd be another character they could use. And then they have a plethora of other Sinister Six characters that they could bring along. So with Deathseed, we had Magneto get a rework, and we had Psylocke get a rework. So in this case, it would be Doc Ock gets a rework, and then probably Vulture or Mysterio gets a rework, because Doc Ock is going to bring Shocker in. That's why I didn't include Shocker here. That's kind of why we also lean towards Vulture. Also because I believe Vulture is still alive in the MCU, and Mysterio is definitely not. So this is all kind of the what ifs. And another what if I guess we should pose is, we notice the stats, even if we have crazy res stars on our Sinister Six, are still underneath nowhere if the war tags are active. What Scourge could bring Sinister Six in line with the Nowhere team? If there is a Scourge that says hero villains get 40% stat boosts across the board, the Sinister Six team would at the very least be the stat equivalent to the Nowhere team, except Swarm would be a goddamn god. Okay, and that'd be really fun. But I think it would also aggravate people a lot because they push the Nowhere team as being the next legendary unlock. They've had them in all kinds of passes. Literally all 4 non-legendary Nowhere characters have been in a pass since their release. So they've been really pushing this team. So I know a lot of spenders have been getting this team super big. Bigger than they ever got the Gamma team off rip. So, I expect the Nowhere team to be the go-to. If you're pushing for this, you're only going to build up one team. I think you build up the Nowhere team. I also think just using common sense. There's a lot of Sinister Six members that are going to suck forever. I don't think Rhino's ever going to have a place again. I don't think Shocker, the character, not the summon, will ever have a place again. Either Mysterio or Vulture are probably getting benched forever as well. Electro is probably going to get benched forever as well, unless they do some sort of Black Order type rework. So in my head, when I'm thinking of where do I want to put my resources in order to climb higher, I don't care if I only have 3 stars on Nowhere. I'm still building them over this Sinister Six hodgepodge team you might want to throw together. Because war offense teams last so much longer than other teams do. Think of Weapon X. Weapon X may not be a top 5 war offense team anymore, but they're still a top 10 team, even 2 years since they were released. They still beat everything from like the top 10 to top 5 war defense teams. They can still take out. They can't take out Darkhold, they can't take out Gamma, they can't take out Infestation. They still wreck everything else. So in my head, building a war offense team over building a potential team that we're probably not going to know about for not this patch. They're not going to rework this patch. Maybe they get reworked next patch. Maybe one of them gets reworked next patch. It's not worth the risk. It's just not. And stat-wise, it's good. You're going to fall flat on your face. I worry about people not unlocking Black Hat. And so if you want my suggestion, 100% do Nowhere. Regardless of your star levels on them, as long as you have them unlocked, do Nowhere. And if you don't have Nova, you still do Nowhere. You just put Doc Ock in that place. And then you build them up however you can. And if you want to know what kind of T4s and ISO8 you can use on those characters, I have all that on the Patreon. And if you bug people in the Discord, they'll link it to you for free. I told everybody if you got the Patreon, link it for free. But if you want to support Patreon, $1 a month would be super appreciated. And that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like, share, subscribe. Have a great day. Bye-bye. That's it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Stay happy, healthy, have fun, and I'll see you in the next one.